All right, okay.
And this is an interview with Walter Lehman.
Right.
And where are you from, Mr. Lehman?
Right now, from Albuquerque.
Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Yeah. At the time I was in the Army, I was from North Dakota.
North Dakota, okay. Now, this interview is taking place on May 18, 1999, in the city of Abilene, Texas. And the interviewer is Fred A. Bailey, who is the chairman of the history department at Abilene Christian University. Now, Walter, that was formal. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You feel comfortable and free to answer them as you will.
Well, some of the languages here is, I could just say, swore an oath or something like that.
No, you don't have to swear an oath.
Huh? I mean, they did.
Oh, okay. Why don't we start, but let me just ask you, where were you born? Where were you born?
Bingham Lake, Minnesota,
Okay.
down in the southern tier counties.
Okay. And what year was that?
Sir?
When were you born?
Oh, February 5th, 1916.
Okay, February 5th, 1916. Thank you very much. In a while, we're going to talk about your World War II experience, but we'd like to talk to you a little bit about growing up in, did you grow up in Minnesota?
Well, until 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to North Dakota, up 10 miles from the Canadian border, a little town. I've been there as a town for 2 years when we landed there. And it grew quite fast for North Dakota towns.
What was the name of the town?
Rock Lake, there's a big lake up there that don't show on the map, but goes on up into Canada. When it fills up, it's 60 miles long.
What was the reason for your parents to move there?
The kid brother's health, he had asthma real bad. He had to get out of Minnesota climate.
What did your father do for a living? Your father, what did he do for a living?
Oh, he worked for a man there by Hawkinson that had a lot of farms started up, and he had immigrants, and Norwegians and Swedes and Finns and some Indians on these farms. He furnished the machinery and the horses, and they split the crop 50-50.
A form of sharecropping?
Yeah, we share, and his job was to run around and check on them and see. Some of them were kind of bashful about asking for machinery, and see that they were doing the work right, kind of overseer.
Now that was your father's job, to be the overseer?
Yeah, that was to start with. Then they got in a political row over the post office, and he was a Republican, and Republicans were in power then. And finally, they'd just come and ask him to be postmaster. The Republican committeemen that were picking out the postmaster for the district. And he was at 21 years until Roosevelt come along.
Now this was your father that was postmaster for 21 years.
And where I come from, Minnesota, was, well, my two grandfathers lived side by side. One of them was a Civil War veteran, and we spent our summers down that. That was one of the promises he made my mother when we moved up there. She could go back there for the summers. So we spent our summers there, and up till 1929. I was 13 by then.
Well, now tell me. I pick up on things. I just want to know things. You say one of your grandfathers was a Civil War veteran.
Yeah.
Obviously on the Union side.
He was on the north. He was with Grant on Siege of Vicksburg. His name is on the little, kind of a, I've never seen it, but it's kind of a memorial church And it was with the Illinois, whatever outfit Lincoln was head of, that's who he's with. And then he had an older brother that was colonel under Sherman. And he was a corporal, but a corporal was about like a lieutenant colonel now. And then, I mean, he had a lot of authority and so on. And like Grant covered that 80-mile front at night with horses. Every 15 miles they changed horses. That's a lot of butt slapping, boy.
What's your favorite memory of that grandfather?
My grandfather?
Yeah, what's your favorite memory of him?
Well, he's just a real nice old gentleman, a long white beard, and he doted in his grandchildren. He had 38 of them. And there's that oldest one still alive. Oh, it's in Illinois. There's 3 cities all along that road. They're all the same names. They don't come to me.
That's okay, no problem.
And my oldest cousin lives there. He's 100 years old.
A long-lived family. Tell me, what is your earliest memory of the place in North Dakota?
Earliest memory?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's Humdinger. We got there in a raging blizzard. You couldn't see from you to me. And they wrapped us 2 kids up in blankets. The horse-drawn sleigh for the dray business, and they took us to my uncle's house. He already lived there. It was about 4 blocks, but you couldn't see your hand. We got there in one of their blizzards, which were common, I found out. One of the reasons I left there.
Now, when did you leave North Dakota? When did you leave North Dakota?
Oh, I signed up with the International Harvester Company. I worked for my uncle, and they come out wanting mechanics and so on. And I signed up and went with them in, well, it had to be the last of June or 1st of July. I don't remember. June, July, yeah. It was in July. Then went to Fort Snelling, and they were so full they sent us home for 2 weeks.
Now, was this during World War II?
Fort Snelling is at Minneapolis, St. Paul area.
Okay.
They sent us home for 2 weeks, so they got it cleaned out, and then we went back again. And they loaded us on a car to go to Camp Perry, Ohio. There was, out of that area, there was about 20 of us. And we got to Camp Perry. I was there 2 days, and they shipped me out to school at General Motors Institute for 2 months. And then by that time they were in Kentucky, and so we went back, and they should have saved money and sent us straight down there. All of us went, that car, they all went back to Kentucky. We were from the 12th Army.
So, okay, so this is, what, 1942? 1943?
Yeah, it was in 1942.
1942. Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to come back to that in a few minutes, okay? Right. My personal interest, I'm a historian, and I write history and I teach history and that sort of thing. And my personal interest is in social history, people like you and me, and things that happen to us.
Maybe I can get more out of these. Sometimes they wind and unwind.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Okay, I'll speak up louder.
No, it's better. I got it better.
How did you become a mechanic?
Just, I worked for, he was older than I was, but I hung around there. He had a garage. And I was probably 5, 6 years older, but he taught me a lot of it. And then the rest of it, I just got it by operation, doing it. So I'd go out, if I couldn't handle the job, I'd get him to come on out. And if I could, why I'd do it. And he had about 3 counties, and I delivered a lot of it with a truck.
Delivered auto parts?
The plows and tractors and combines and so on. Set up a lot of them. And they had a factory man come in on the first one. He and I worked on it, setting it up. I didn't need any help after that. So.
Now, tell me a bit. This is an agricultural community.
Oh yes, it is.
Tell me a bit about the agriculture.
The main crop is the durum wheat that they make macaroni and spaghetti and all that out of. And it's when we got a crop, the premium was a lot of times 45, 50 cents a bushel on it. They paid premium for it. It's an old Lake Agassiz lake bed, that flat country that floods around Grand Forks. Well, it's just like this floor for 20 miles. You can have water on both sides of it, and you can see the whole thing when it's flooding. It's up the highways high, and it grows the premium wheat in there, and premium potatoes, about 400 bushels to the acre.
Wow.
It's black loam about that deep. You know, it just comes up as black as can be when you're plowing it.
Well, now, that area prospered during the 1920s.
Yeah, it did. During World War I, it prospered, and then it went downhill. We had dryouts and wind blow and move all the soil and just a little bit of everything. But we weren't farming at that time. He was in the post office.
So the post office helped you all financially?
Oh, sure. He paid the best paying job in town, that little town. And then the Roosevelt, he got a letter, I don't imagine it was fake anyhow, that from Roosevelt to resign immediately. They were going to put somebody else in. So he sent it back with return mail. You know, it took them 3 years to find a Democrat that could fill it. I mean, they had test after test. They couldn't pass it. And the scoring is 50% for application, 50% for the rest. The application just means who you are, see, in the Democrat Party.
Well, now, did your father stay as postmaster until they filled it with the Democrat?
Yeah, 3 more years.
Oh, my.
I think he knew what he was doing.
Well, that's the Great Depression. When did you realize the country was in a depression?
Well, he went out in '34, and I was 18 years old, and we had no money. My mother had been sick and had in Rochester 2 or 3 times, and he had a house, and we sold that for $800 and bought a tractor. You could buy a 3-plow tractor. Bought a tractor, and a couple of neighbors loaned us machinery the first year. And we bought a farm, a federal land bank, good buildings, and 400 acres, $4,000.
Now, does your family still have that farm?
No, when I left, I said, I don't think I'm going to come back and farm. I said, I've had my belly full of it. And he was in his late 60s. And he said, well, I'm going to get out of here too. So his mother and two sisters lived in Akron, Ohio. And he went back there and got a job in the rubber shop doing the bust, you know. And he sold the farm for $17,000. So it would come out pretty good on that. And then, well, let's see, he died in 1962.
Well, he would have been quite, about 90 something.
Huh?
He would have been in his 90s when
No, he's 75.
Oh, 75.
Yeah, my mother was 92 when she died.
Oh.
She outlived all of her family. She had a total of 9 brothers and sisters. She was about 2 years afterwards that she died, after the last of them.
So at the age of 18, you would have been 18 in 1934, right?
Well, 34 is when I graduated from high school.
Okay. And what did you do immediately after high school?
Well, I mostly worked for my uncle. He had this thing, and he had a couple guys they couldn't depend on, and finally convinced him he couldn't depend on them, so they didn't call him in anymore, and I had more work.
Right. So you'd become a pretty good mechanic before World War II.
Yeah.
I had a couple of just interesting questions, okay? Just out of interest. My father, by the way, was at Pearl Harbor. My dad was in the Army Air Corps when they bombed it. Where were you on December the 7th, 1941?
I was home sick with the flu, listening to the radio. I very seldom ever had it, but they all went to church, and I said, I'm not going, I'm going to stay here where it's warm. I don't want to get out in the cold.
And what, when did you hear that? When you listened to the radio?
What time of the day?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it was about noon.
And what was your reaction when you heard about it?
It's hard for me to believe it. And you know, right away I could see all kinds of trouble ahead. And it was, taking the crop off that fall was a terrible time getting help. They go up, Dad went up, and he'd worked with the Indians before. He went up there and got a whole threshing crew for a fellow that had a tractor and a separator and so on. He said, I'll get you a little crew. And they come down, brought the bundle racks with them and the teams. And when it rained, they'd take 2 teams, one of them pulling the wagon and about 6 of them in the wagon. And they could go home for the weekend, 30 miles. What they do is run one team until they get tired, and then switch teams, and then the others still got to run, but they rest running. Yeah, Indian ponies are tougher than whale leather, you know.
So did your father use Indian labor a good deal?
Yeah, he whoever thrashed for us, he'd see to it they had bundle teams.
Now, what do you mean by bundle teams?
Well, the teams, they haul the bundles in, pitch them into the grain separator, and then they go out and load up and haul them in again. It's about the hardest work I ever did. Darn bundles of that Durham weigh about 60 pounds apiece. You know, all day long throwing them, and then throwing them off this way. And then the owner quite often will put on what he called a spiky to help unload, get them back quicker. And then he put out field pitchers that stayed out there and helped load.
So these are just different tasks that people would do?
Yeah.
Okay. Marvelous memory, I love that.
They had it all figured out. I could get the worst and most money for their pennies. $2 a day. I haul bundles for $2 a day.
But that was a lot of money.
Oh, it was then, yes. They put a steam, uh, the railroad had a high trestle across the lake there, and they were having trouble with it all the time, and replacing posts and so on, so they brought up a steam shovel and hired a bunch of dump trucks, and they drove across the trestle and dumped their trucks in. And I just went out to see the steam shovel. I'd never seen a steam shovel work before. And the engineer in charge of it said, could you get me 5 or 6 guys? Just all I got to do is poke the dirt down through those cracks, you know. He said, I'll furnish the shovels, and I'll pay them $1 an hour. I couldn't believe it. And so I tore back and got 5 of my buddies and told the superintendent of school, he says, you can count us out of taking final exams because we got a job. And he did. And he gave us our diplomas anyhow. So, but and then the ones that were on relief thought we should all quit and give them the job. There was way more money than the relief worker was getting. They were getting something like 75 cents an hour.
Now, was that, let's see, relief workers, you're referring to the Work Projects Administration?
What?
WPA, Works Projects Administration? Did you, are you familiar with the Civilian Conservation Corps?
Dad was too well off, I couldn't get into it.
Oh, okay.
As far as they were concerned, see, it was controlled by the Democrats, and he was leading Republican. He'd replaced putting every borderman on the Dakota and Manitoba line. They'd come to him and get it. They even come from out of state. They were eligible to come and interview with him, and he'd pick one of them and put them up there. He took 2 or 3 of them from out of state. Most of them they tried to give to the fellows there in the county. But
now this is, I'm sorry, you're talking about what now?
well, patronage is
Oh.
what they used to call it.
So this is where your father was hiring people to deliver mail and that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Okay.
And he made a lot of friends.
And that's the way the post office worked back then?
Yeah, governor always stopped in to see him, and I met the governor when I was about 13 years old, and my mother had a brother that lived down there. She wanted to go down and see him, so I drove her down. I was only 13 when I drove her down there, and I started driving at 10, and there was no rules against it. And when I come home, I went to work in Akron. The Cadillac dealer, they want to know where my driver's license. I says, here's the only driver's license I got. Here's the one I got in the Army. I don't know anything about any other. But they got me a driver's license with it anyhow. I still got that thing. Or I haven't either. My boy climbed down to it. He's got it for keepsake now.
Well, let's talk about the 12th Armor. And for the record, what was your rank?
Tech sergeant, 3 down, 2 up.
Okay. Sir?
Oh, yeah.
That's better. That's much better. Thank you.
That's a bad habit I got.
Oh, we all have habits. That's fine. But recording is just better that way. You were a tech sergeant. Specify the unit you were in. What unit were you in?
I was with the ordnance, 134th Ordnance of the 12th Armored Division.
Okay.
See, each battalion's got a number, maybe a name, you know.
Well, now let's go back to what you were talking about earlier. How did you get into the Army? What did you volunteer?
I enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
I enlisted.
What motivated you to enlist?
Pardon?
Why did you do it?
Because I was sick of the place and I wanted to get out. That's the main reason. The crop wasn't amount to anything, and you know, that's it. If you don't get a crop, you got skimpy living, or you have to look for every little job you can. It's no good for a working man. It's no good at all.
So you saw this as a chance to get out of North Dakota.
Well, my dad was thinking about quitting farming, and I'd be all mine, but I didn't have any desire for that. And if you be paying Federal Land Bank the price of things were there for another 15 years, but they had a crazy law there. It's the most socialized state in 48 or 50 it is, and they got their own mill and elevator, and allow the jail makes machinery and makes license plates, and they've got more than that. The bank is a state bank that they run, and most of them patronize it, so other banks don't have much chance.
Well, that's South Dakota, so you wanted to leave. Tell me about the day you enlisted. Do you remember the day you enlisted? Did you go?
Well, I had to go to county seat, if I remember right. Yeah, we went to county seat, and there was another fellow going to from Canada was the county seat. He was going from there, and we picked up another one. Oh, he was retired Marine from. There was in Peking, China, for 8 years with a guard for the. He was the head of that, and he enlisted. He worked for the machine company. And he gave me a lot of steers. I says, how do you behave in the service? I said, I don't know anything about it. He says, just keep your mouth shut, don't volunteer for anything. He says, that's where they get their duty roster. So I did. And then the first time I ever pulled guard was on the ship going over. The captain got the top deck for our company, and that was the deal. He'd pull guard. Well, he made 5 of the techs the sergeant of the guard. I don't know what he did with the other 3, but a couple of them were fairly old too, and we went over on the Empress of Australia, if you ever heard of it. Huh?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Well, the English boat. And my wife says I'm lying when I say it. The maggots floated in the gravy. A couple of the young kids said, "Oh, looky, we got new, rice with the gravy this time." I said, "Wake up, you stupid so-and-sos, and take it out and roll it on the table and see what it is." Oh, it was terrible, really, really terrible. They give you an orange or an apple or like a hard-boiled egg for breakfast, and oatmeal you couldn't eat it or you couldn't drink it. It was thin, and they had the material because they were selling sandwiches for $4.50 a piece in between times. See, that was a lot of money then. And I told
this is on the trip to England, right?
I told 2 of guys on guard. I said, you catch that guy and I'll take care of him. So they did, and it was a full master sergeant. He did his last trip before he retired. And nailed him, and they court-martialed him right there on the boat. And discharged without any pension. I felt bad about that for the guy, but he deserved it. He'd been pulling that on several trips. That same ship made a trip from New York all the way around, clear to Australia. And the wife had 2 cousins on it, and they both died of premature death because they had to carry them off. They were so spent by the time they got there they didn't have strength to walk off.
Because they hadn't eaten very well?
Yeah.
So this sergeant then was taking the food and selling
Oh, sure. He was getting rich off of the $4.50. He might have been paying a few of them a little on the side.
Well, let's go back. That was the trip over, of course, after you've been trained. But let's go back now. You enlisted.
Yes.
And do you know what month that was? 1942. What month?
1940, or 1934, or 42. You're right.
Yeah. And you enlisted. Where did you go immediately? Where did they take you?
You mean the induction center?
Right.
It's Fort Snelling, Minnesota. It's up between Minneapolis and St. Paul.
And they found out you were a mechanic.
Yeah, that's right.
And so was it at that point they decided what you would do?
I didn't have anything to decide. They did it for me. The only reason I could ever figure out is my mechanical aptitude test they gave me. I only missed getting a perfect score by 3 points. and I was younger than the rest of them that they put in there.
Okay. So when did you, earlier you were talking about, then you ended up with the International Harvester Brigade, is that right?
Well, through my uncle, I worked for him all through high school, a little, and then after I got out of high school, I worked pretty steady with him.
Now you ended up with the 12th Armory in Kentucky, right? You ended up with the 12th Armory in Kentucky?
Yeah, but I knew where I was going. They called it 134th Ordnance, the 12th Armored Division when they were talking to us.
Oh, just a second. Where is this your room? Here, come on in. Thanks. That's all right. Everything's cool. Just somebody came in for a second.
Yeah.
Things are fine. Tell me about share with me a little bit about your experience in Kentucky.
In the Army?
Yes, in the Army in Kentucky. Just share that with me.
Well, by following old Marv's rules, I got along pretty good to start with. And when I found out I had a platoon where it slowed me down a little bit, but I got along just fine. Captain, if I had to pick out the next to best friend I had in the outfit was him. He always went for anything I mentioned.
Now, who was this captain?
Yeah, and he got, after we got overseas, he wanted me to go to the division headquarters. He didn't get along with the colonel. I could talk to the colonel, and the colonel would never get mad, but he'd tell me what to ask him, and I'd ask him, because I was running this platoon away most of the time from the company, up just a little bit behind the front lines. And the guys, they wanted to shoot him at German, and I said, listen, you clowns, you're here to repair machinery, let the rest of them take care of the Germans. And I never lost a man.
Great.
Uh,
The, what was the captain's name?
McAfee's.
McAfee's.
He's from southern Illinois.
Okay.
He had a machine business and a feed store, he and his father. And his two kids, one of them took that over and the other one went to Denver and started one.
Now you said he was your second best friend. Tell me about your best friend.
Well, it was another tech sergeant, Max Atkins. He was from St. Louis. And we razzed each other. The Negro situation bothered him, and our quartermaster works all Negro, and we had service our trucks. Well, and he do the job of getting them a place to sleep. And I used to say, "Hey, Max, I got a couple friends for you tonight." It riled him up. He finally got used to it.
What was the problem with finding a place for Negroes to sleep?
Well, he'd already scouted that, got the houses for enough, and he always got enough for. We knew there was a bunch. 5 or 6 trucks coming every night with gas. See, gas was hauled in 5-gallon cans from Le Havre.
Oh, okay.
And those poor guys were on that truck 24 hours a day. They turned sleeping in the other seat. And one of us would have a map of where the tanks were, but they had a heavy hand down in dark. And I would joke with those Negroes. I said, "Smile, damn it. So I can see your teeth. I don't know where you are." And they thought it was funny, But just that little light would reflect on their teeth.
Now, for the sake of people watching this tape, let me explain to them where we are, okay? Yeah. We're talking, you and I, about the African-American experience,
yeah,
as you saw it. And the Le Havre is a port in France. And one of the problems the 12th Armor had, as all armor units had, was not enough gasoline. So the African-Americans, the Negroes, were engaged in what was called the Red Ball Express, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And as you said, they were 24 hours just constantly taking gasoline to the front.
Yeah, constantly.
Now, let's go back to your friend then. You said that had the problem. Was this problem just not finding places for them to sleep?
Oh, we had the places for them. Sleep was just made a needle in him a little bit.
How did your men feel about working with Negroes?
Well, some of them, we had some guys in there didn't know the Civil War was over, from the South. And you had trouble getting that through their head. Franklin Roosevelt was, if something happened to him, the war would end, I really let him have it when he died. Look at here. He's been dead 2 days, and we're going on just the same. And I says, I don't see anything any different, and I don't think anybody misses him.
Let me see if I can guess. You're a Republican.
Yeah.
Or you were then.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And so, I'm trying to decide where to go with this, because you're fascinating. This is great. I'm enjoying it. To some of your men, Roosevelt was a hero.
Huh?
Some of your men thought Roosevelt was a great hero. You didn't feel that way.
The Negroes?
Well, okay, we'll go with the Negroes. How did they feel about Roosevelt?
As a as a company, we had a bunch of swell fellas as far as I was concerned. We had some welders that were out of this world, out of the shipyards in Groton, Connecticut. And
So you had a lot of welders,
yeah,
and in fact, your people were very skilled. These were civilian skills, right?
they were civilian skills. This guy by the name Atkins was a welder out of there, and he had a tank with a, it must have been a dud. The 88 went about halfway through it, and it poked a hole about that big around and got, you know, it's that thick armor plate, and it was stuck in the hole, and they knocked it out with a sledgehammer. And I said, just knock that thing back in with a sledgehammer and weld it right there. That's you save a lot of welding rod. And so that's what they did. And it just right for a step to get up into it. And oh boy, the rest of them all wanted to bore a hole in theirs and put a step on it.
Okay. Well, now let's see. One of the things that fascinates me about the 12th Armor is that in April of 1945, you all liberated death camps. Were you participating in the liberation of the concentration camps? Did you participate in the liberation of concentration camps?
Well, I was in 3 of them. I didn't participate. The first one, we'd been out, I was out with a small crew and fixed a couple trucks on the tank that were along the road. We knew what they needed. And then I heard voices. It was down in a road in between two higher, 500 feet on each side. And I look up there and I see a couple guys in prison uniforms. Well, right away I hollered at them, and 2 of them could speak English. And they come down, and they hadn't anything. They were escapees. It's just when the guards started pulling out, and they escaped, and they got enough information that they knew there was no guards back there. And they were about 5 miles from there. Oh, they wanted to get back there and see if they could help some of their friends. Well, I said, I'll take you back there. And they hadn't anything to eat. And I gave them K rations and cautioned them how to eat them, and not to eat the chocolate and make drink out of it, because it could give you diarrhea or something terrible if you drank it. And and 2 of them, it was 40 degrees weather, and they didn't even have any shirt or anything. And the guys dug in their duffel bags and would come up with some shirts and rip the coverings off and give them to them. And we took them back there. And there was a lieutenant there from one of the armored infantry battalions that I knew him from past experience, because I'd covered their outfit too. And he said he had a bunch of people that could still get around. He said, these guys want me to take some guns from my platoon, and they want to shoot the rest of these guards here. They had them surrounded. Well, I said, I don't think anybody would do anything to you for that. He did. And they shot about 10, 12 guards. Yeah, they had a good reason to.
You say there were 3 camps. Can you tell me about one of the others?
Oh, I can't give you the name of them, but up in Albuquerque about 2 weeks ago, they showed one of the prison camps on about 9 o'clock at night. And Gladys says, "What in the heavens is that?" And I was reading, I just looked up, and it says, "That's concentration camp. That's the entrance to the very first one I went into." And I mean, they just, this was under the Germans who were dragging them just down the street by an arm or a leg and then dumping them in a big pit. And when I got there was flat cars with legs and arms on, and other flat cars with bodies, and then there are box cars, no roof on them, full of heads. I think you just gag. Some of them did. They just threw up, and the odor was. These people in the city said they couldn't smell it. You could smell it 10 miles before you ever got to the city. It was that rank.
And how old were you when you saw that?
Oh, that'd be 26, 27.
I bet that was quite an experience for a young man, 26, 27. How did that affect you?
It was a terrible experience. Sometimes, for several years afterwards, I wake up at night, get thinking about it, and I couldn't go back to sleep.
The war came to an end. The war ended. How did you find out the war was over with?
Oh, just by the radio. The last one that was slowing down, we finished it in Europe before they did. The Colmar Pocket was my last operation. That was the last of it. And then Patton was controlling that, and he's something else too. I got along with him just fine. I honestly did. He'd be out wherever there was a roadblock or something like that. The only general I ever saw in combat.
Okay. Well, so tell me about Patton. You saw him at a distance, or?
No, I talked to him.
Really?
He had the Red Ball Express had a truck crossways in the city, and the streets are narrow. The back bumper was tied against this building, and the front bumper was tied against this. And the two neighbors were driving it were wore out. I mean, they were completely fagged. He says, I can't lift the K ration, he told me. And he wanted to get down that road. And so got the record driver to back up to it. And I took a couple of gallons of oil. We carried oil on the record, spread them on the street there in the front. And it was a double load of gasoline. We had it way high, see. I said, okay, just use the winch. No jerking. Just, it was full of gasoline too. So, and it'd come out, and it meant, I told Patton before he started, I said, we're going to bend two bumpers so we can straighten them afterwards. And it's okay with me, he said. So we brought it around and straightened the bumpers. And that's the most I ever heard him cuss, but he said, Sarge, he says, that's damn good thinking. He went on his way. But I ran into him one day. I saw a soldier all by himself up on the hill. And this far enough away I couldn't tell he was an officer. So I stopped and walked part way up and hollered at him. It was Patton. He was just surveying it. He didn't have anybody with him or anything. Just all by himself. MacArthur used to do that too.
Now, the war in Europe came to a conclusion in May 1945.
Yeah.
May 1945. Where were you the day the war came to an end in Europe?
Well, I was an attached service to the French Foreign Legion. I had been there for about 3 weeks. And that was Patton's idea too. Nobody can tell me any different. They would, a truck had a flat tire, they'd run it in the ditch and leave it, you know. And he wanted to get it straightened out. They had a general Tenazier that was de Gaulle's assistant. He was running what was left of the army, about half of the French army and the French Foreign Legion. That was it. There wasn't much to it. It was the American 12th Armored Division cleaned out the last of it. So I would say I was right there in that neighborhood of that city, and I heard it.
Now, you say you were attached to the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
And I want you to pick up on something you just said, because that interested me. When they didn't take very good care of their vehicles, is that what you were saying?
Well, they didn't. They lived off the land. They got $8 a month, and all they could steal. They stole their food. They carried 6 or 7 women with them for cooks, and the only thing they ever did was bake bread. The rest, their bread and their barbecue. They had good barbecue, man. He gave me barbecue sandwiches as good as I ever got in my life, off a nice fat heifer they'd killed the night before and had it cooking all night.
Makes you want to be in the French Army.
Yeah.
That was better than that sergeant going over, right?
He was a guy from New York City. He let that much out. And he just called me Harold. No, nothing else.
Well, Walter, I can tell you're getting tired. Look, I'll ask a couple more questions and we'll wrap this up, okay? You returned to the United States, and where did you settle?
I went to Akron, Ohio.
Okay, and what did you do?
I went to work for Cadillac Wholesale dealership.
Were you a mechanic for them?
Well, nobody wanted to monkey with automatic transmissions. You know, the first place I didn't know anything about them. And basically, automatic transmission, I don't care whose it is, it's foreign or not. The powertrain in it is a Model T Ford. And old Henry, and all they did was put bands of Henry used bands and brake bands, you know, and then the first ones had bands in it too, but now it's all electronic and oil. You use a governor to control it, and they're not that hard. I made darn good money. They offered me the job of being service manager, but I said I can make more money on transmissions than I can on that job.
Now, you got married? When did you get married?
What?
When did you get married?
Oh, 47.
47. And how many children did you have?
2.
2?
Have a boy that's general manager of Cadillac, Isuzu, Subaru, and the Lexus. They got all of them. They run 1,500 cars a month, new and used.
And you have a daughter?
Yeah, and they sold the Lexus about 2 weeks ago. I think the Lexus don't like the idea of being associated with them. And they made money on that. And 3 guys from Tucson come in and bought it. They got to build a garage yet, but they had it extras. And Lexus won't give a dealer a dealership unless he builds a separate showroom. So they had the showroom, and they just letting them lease it till they get their garage built. And they're still doing the work for them, as far as, but they put their own cashiers in there and to keep track of what the parts are all mixed up. So I don't know how they handle that. But he's over parts, and in sales, and for about 2 months there he was over the whole thing, acting general manager, writing checks and everything for it.
Well, Walter, I want to ask you something, okay? You've experienced the Great Depression.
Oh yes.
And you've experienced World War II, and you've experienced raising a family. What would you like to share with whoever's watching this tape about your experiences?
Well, I don't know. The atrocities of the prison camps and so on, I think they're going to be on television more. It was our public service station that had it on. Somebody else told me they had it on one other night. So there must be some of them showing it. Anybody can watch that first time and keep all his cookies. He's pretty tough.
Walter, I want to thank you very much. You have been a great sport, and I appreciate this. And people that I don't know and you don't know appreciate it.
He told me, he said something about, you want to know about General Brewer too.
Okay, yes, by all means. Tell me, you knew General Brewer?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about General Brewer.
Well, the way I met General Brewer was when I come home, I come back to the base for to go to work. His tank was sitting there. I knew it was a general's tank. It was covered with a flag and all. And I asked the shop officer what it's in for. Well, he says they can't get it shift right. Oh, I said, well, I got a bulletin I brought with me. There's a bunch of them on that. And then I said, I'll look at it tomorrow. So we just got in there just about time they closing up for the night. And I said, I got to take it out so I can drive it. Is the rifle range open? And so he called up to see, and he said, nobody on it. That was about a half a mile over to the rifle range. We drove over there. All I had to do was adjust them so they'd both shift itself. I'd just take clevis loose and take half a turn at a time. It took about a half an hour to get it so it just clicked, you know, boom, boom. And I said to the kid with me, and I said, let's see what one of these things will do. He said, yeah, let's do it. And the dust was about that thick, that red clay. And we headed up to 45, 50 miles an hour, and he tapped my shoulder, and I turned on the intercom system. You can't hear nothing. He says, there's a general following us. I said, oh, we're home one day, and I'm in Dutch already. I stopped and grabbed the had a work order like a shop, you know, got out, and about that time he was halfway over to the tank. I said, well, here, General, it says it didn't run right, it didn't shift right, and I said I had to bring it out here to get it to clicking. And he bought it, and he went back, got in his Jeep, and then I started climbing in the tank, and I see him coming back, and I thought, oh boy, he's thought of going to chew me out or something. And no, he come back, and he says, I hate to bother about getting in that tank, but if anybody wants it verified, you just tell them to call me. Then we just moved to we moved in with a bunch of junk from 10th Armored, and he wanted it all checked, complete, thorough check. He was a stickler for good equipment. The all the training they got under him, they didn't get any training after they went overseas. He was the main cog there, and after. Yeah, we went from there to right here at Abilene, and I forget what I run. Oh no! Then they took him out of here about 3 weeks before we went overseas, and I thought that was kind of dirty. But he took a cut to you couldn't send a 2-star general overseas. That was the Army rule. I don't know why. But he took a cut in pay and rank, and he went to a colonel and had artillery was his specialty. He borrowed parts of different divisions and set up a big artillery for the Battle of Bulge. It just lit up the sky. We were in the Battle of Bulge, but I never thought about him. I thought about him. In fact, I knew he had set that up, but I didn't. I thought, what chance of ever seeing him would be zilch. Well, then they took 34 of us out of the armored division and sent us into the military government. And we run around to check factories and mines and stuff to see to get them back in business, and called on some of the big shots. And we were all car factories and so on. I got Mercedes building trucks, and Bosch he had the equipment to build heaters for the Jeeps for the winter, and I was in his house, talked to him.
Who is this?
He had a Bosch electric. A nice old fellow, skinny as and all his helpers skinny. And he said, I generally put out something to eat when I have company, but we don't have anything to eat. I said, no problem. I went out and got a case of K-rations, and I said, no, I can't speak German, but he spoke good English. I said, you tell him on that chocolate to make about 4 cups of cocoa out of each one of them, and they won't get diarrhea. So he did, and I gave him a whole carton to feed his crew, and nobody wanted it after you got to so they could serve meals every day. That was a good way to get rid of it.
Walter, thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been a joy. A real joy for me.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Stay seated just a second. I want to take this off of you. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, because we don't want to have a disaster there. And let's see.